Hey there, Emma from Paint Wild, and in this video I want to show you 4 different Easter themed patterns for you to try. We are going to paint some colourful Easter eggs that blend into each other. We are going to paint a couple versions of bunnies. We're going to do some on dry paper, some on wet, and then we're also going to paint some of those like little plastic chicken toys wet on wet as well. Apologies in advance, my voice is barely hanging in there, but we will push on. So let's get started with the first project, which is the colourful Easter eggs. Now, this is an activity that I just used to do for fun. It was just to blend circles into one another. I talk about this in the video on my channel all about colour schemes, and it's a really good activity for understanding water control and how quickly you need to do something to a piece of watercolour on your paper in order for it to react the way that you want. Now, because we are going to use a lot of different colours, like we're aiming for the 12 colours in the colour wheel, it's easier if you just prepare a couple of puddles on your palette. We've obviously got the primary colours that will sit in their own pan, so we don't need to put them on the palette, but I'm mixing up the secondary colours, or a near enough version of them. So a bit of an orangey colour, a bit of a purple colour, a bit of a green. And what we want to do is start painting little Easter egg shapes at the top, and then we will work our way down the page and start transitioning the colour as we go. Now, what I like to do is work in a bit of a diagonal pattern, because if I just painted the top row all across at once, it is going to be dry by the time I get back to the second row. So I'm kind of trying to work around all the edges that I'm creating at once. So I've started with yellow, then I've touched the edges of that egg with 2 others that are more watery. And this is how we get this really fun, light and airy look. If we didn't use a watered down circle next to some of these, it would just be really bold and bright. And look, you might want to do that, that's totally fine. But I like to have a bit of variation in the concentration of the color, just to make it look a bit more floaty and airy and like it was painted with watercolor. So you don't have to mix up like all 12 colors of the color wheel, because the beauty of this activity is the colors are going to blend with each other and mix that way as well. So that's why I only bothered mixing up the secondaries. I will adjust them a tiny little bit as I go, just in case I do want a bit more depth. Like I already added some more primary red to the original orange puddle to get more of a red color. And with the purple as well, I'll adjust that, because the one I've got on my palette is a bit more of a red violet at this stage. And so you don't want to get too caught up in perfecting, the best egg shape you can. You really do have to move quite quickly, and especially as you get as many as I've got now, there's like quite a few eggs that have damp edges that I need to go back to quickly. I don't always get them at the right time, some of them already dry. I find that it's best to just keep moving and not worry about it. Like, don't try to paint over an existing egg, or you can just make it worse. So you can already see we've got this flow happening, and what you learn if you use too much color is that you'll actually see all of the color wash through the painting and kind of like trickle down like a waterfall. That's when you know you've got probably too much water in all of these little eggs or bubbles, depending on what you paint. And if you don't see any blending of the color, then you know that you've waited too long, or you didn't use enough water and there was no exchange between them. But I absolutely love this activity. I find it really calming. This is sped up a little bit because it's just so repetitive. I didn't want anyone sitting through 15 minutes of me doing the same thing. So you might want to practice this separately before you do your final piece. You might even want to just practice this technique with one color first of all, to make sure you're getting the variation in saturation. You're learning how to put color down, touch the edges with 2 other watery ones, go back in with color. It does take a little bit of practice, but I mean, the end result is just super fun, and I really do like it for a bit of a water control activity as well. Now, I spent a lot of this portrait just getting like one side of the color wheel in, almost 3/4 of the way down, and then I realized, I really have to start switching to some of these blue-green colors now. You can also spread them out a lot more than what I've done as well. I will show you another version of this painting from years ago when I first did this, and you'll see that the eggs are a little bit more spread out. There's more negative space on the page, And that's just going to make it less stressful for you because you've got less things and less edges that you have to go in and touch something else up against. But almost at the end of this now, we've got our greens happening, our blue greens. And what I ended up deciding was, when I'd done this a few years ago, I thought it would be really fun to paint like some foil patterns on them. You know how you get like Easter eggs in a packet and they have like one half of the foil is one color, the other half is another, they have stripes, they have dots, whatever it may be. I thought it'd be really fun to paint them on, but the last time I did it, I just used matte colors, like the colors I'm painting with. And this time I was like, wait a second, I have a whole bunch of iridescent colors that I make by hand now that match all of these colors, so I want to go and add them in. Now, just one thing to note as well that I didn't pay attention to properly as I got down the bottom here was I made them really squished and I made them like go over the border. So what I want to do here is just like make them finish rounded. So I've just peeled a little bit of my tape back so that I can go in and just fix those edges up and make them look a little bit more rounded. But as you do this, you may notice that, like, you know, you paint over one of them and you've got to now go and correct another one, and then you just find yourself overworking everything. So try and pre-plan a little bit better than me. I just got to the end and I was like, oh, I've got to squish them now because I didn't plan my colors properly. But that is all dry now. Look how fun that is. All the exchange of water and color, I absolutely love it. And now I want to go and paint in some colorful, metallic-ish looking paint, iridescent paint patterns on them just to make them pop. So I've gone ahead and grabbed this little sample dot card that I make, and please, I don't want to see any comments about how they look like nipples, okay? I get it. I didn't see it when I was making it and it was an oversight, and I get it, okay? Anyway, I'm going and painting a bunch of different patterns. Now, what you want to think about is which little eggs to place these on, and I'm just doing the same patterns, stripes, dots, half and half. Because if you go in and paint these on all the watery eggs, it's going to make the painting look very flat in contrast. It would be basically like doing none of the watery ones in the first place. And so I find that they do also stand out a little bit better on the darker ones as well. It really depends what you're painting. Like the stripes will stand out better on the lighter colored ones, but when you're painting half and half, I found it looked a little bit better on the full saturation ones. It really depends, but be a bit mindful, because as I started painting a bunch of the light ones with the pattern, I was like, oh, now I've taken away all that fun contrast that I created with the water anyway. So try and mix it up so that it doesn't end up just being one flat block. But there we go, that is the colourful Easter eggs with all their patterns on there. I'm going to show you with my phone camera light in a second just so you can see the true fun iridescent nature of it all. I really liked pairing these two things together. Look at that, beautiful and shiny. That would make such a fun like Easter card if you give cards out for Easter, or it's just a fun project to hang on your wall. And you can see the one on the left there where I spaced them out and made them a bit bigger. But let's move on to project number 2 now, and we're going to paint some little loose bunny rabbits. Just a bit of a pattern. Again, you could use this for a bunch of stuff. I don't know. I'm just throwing the ideas out there. You can execute how you want. But I wanted a few brown colors on my palette, or at least 2, more of a warm and more of a cool, slightly darker. So I started out by mixing red, primary red, and green, made of primary yellow and primary blue. Those are opposite each other on the color wheel, red and green, so they'll neutralize each other. And then in one part of the puddle, I'm just deepening that up. I added a bit of blue, and you basically, if you see a bias in there, like if the mixture looks too purple, you add the opposite to neutralize it, so yellow. And this is just going to help you end up with a couple different types of browns. And then I really just wanted to paint some loose looking bunny rabbits in there. So, you know, I just Googled a bunch of pictures of like rabbit poses and just used them as a little bit of inspiration. But I've just loosely popped a couple ears, and that's the main feature that I'm going with, just these loose big ears. Then popping in a bit of a circle shape for the head and a big blob for the body, squiggly little lines for the tail, and a couple cute little feet. This one's looking a bit squished, a bit condensed, so as I go, I start to adjust it a little bit. I'm also changing up the color as I go. This one's going to be standing up a little bit higher. I'm positioning the blob of the body under it, fluffy little cotton tail, watering down my mixture and going ahead with the next one. loose little ears, again in a V. I'll mix it up soon and make like one ear more floppy, and changing the body shape as well. When you're thinking about painting patterns like this, you want to try and vary things up. I always tell my students, even when we're painting things like feathers or fur or stripes or whatever it may be, spots, try not to make it look like a pattern, because then it becomes quite distracting for the viewer's eye. And so if I positioned all of these bunnies equal distances and heights apart, all facing the same direction, it's just going to be, it's going to feel a little bit like weird. I like to vary things up to keep people's eye moving across the work, instead of just being like, oh yep, it all looks the same, I only need to look at one. They'll go, oh, what's that one doing? That one's a different size, a shape, a different saturation, different pose. I think it just makes things a little bit easier. So I've done one here that's standing up more, so we've got its little front paws kind of drooping down and it's sitting up on the back legs. This one is going to be looking at it from behind, so I've done the fluffy little tail in the middle of the back, then popping its head onto the right, and then we go with our first little droopy ear over to the side. And like, I'm winging this, I didn't come into this with a plan of exactly where to put them, so it's not the most perfectly executed pattern by the end. Like, I haven't utilized equal negative space, so you might want to plan it a tad better than me. I was just really having fun, and to me that's the point of these exercises. I just want you to have a bit of fun. A lot of people just don't even try painting because they just think, oh, I can't do that. And you have to give it a go, even if the first iteration, the first 10, the first 100 iterations are not to your liking. It's the only way to get better. You don't just wake up one day and have a new skill. You have to try. You have to practice. So I've done a little leaping bunny here. It's quite loose. It's kind of hard to see what I've done, but it's jumping down to the bottom left. Then we're doing another little bunny facing the right, because not many are at this point. And so if you want to point the direction of their face in a certain way, you can just make the snout part a little bit pointier instead of rounded. So trying to mix up the colors of these a little bit as well. If it feels a bit heavy, go and add a watery one like I'm doing here. You know, I really found this an enjoyable activity because I do paint realism most of the time, which means it comes with a sketch, it comes with an exact reference photo, and it was really fun to just kind of wing it and try to start putting brush marks down on paper and see where it took me. Like, if I compare where I'm up to now to the very first one I painted on the page, they've already come a long way. So just give it a go, have some fun. The thing about art is it doesn't have to go in a gallery. You don't even have to show anybody. It's all about just getting some time and doing something for you. Putting brush to paper. Squishing in a little one here at the bottom because I've really run out of room for any more standing up ones in here. So I've got one crouched over with a little ear bent over to the front, and we'll try and fit another one down the bottom here. So I wanted to do a bunny that was more like, what do you call them, like a lop-eared bunny? I could be making that up. But with the ears that aren't sticking up, they're actually drooping down. So that would help me fit that one in. Cottontail out to the side, and then these big droopy little ears on either side of the head. Squishing one more in down the bottom. Fitting those little ears between the two in the middle. Pointing that little face off to the right like I mentioned, making that one a bit more angular. Fluffy little cottontail and cute little feet. And then we'll dry that all off, and that's just a fun little bunny pattern. I think it's really cute. You don't have to worry about making it realistic. There's so many, and if you vary the position and the poses and the directions and the size and the shape and the colors, it keeps people's eyes moving and they're not focused on like, oh, that's not a perfectly proportioned bunny. They're just briefly looking at the shapes and they can put it together in their mind. Now I wanted to try the same sort of thing, loose bunnies, except I wanted to paint them wet on wet. And this will be, if you're not familiar with watercolor techniques all that much, this will be a really good example, as will the next one after this, of like what happens when you paint wet on wet and the effect that a damp page has. Like, I'm not going to be able to paint as many on this damp piece of paper now because it's going to travel. Like the color I put down, even though I just dabbed off some excess, it is going to run. Watercolor goes where water is. So I'm just doing the same kind of thing. I'm just doing little bunny shapes, starting with these big ears, then a little circular shape for the head, big blob for the body, and popping in feet and tail if I need to. I didn't do that on this one. So I can only really fit like 5 or 6 on this sheet of paper because you're going to see the water spread out. This one I decided to have the cottontail at the back, and I've negatively painted it, so I've just painted around it. One down the bottom with some tilted ears, more laying on the ground instead of sitting up. I'm not worrying too much about like varying the saturation of the color with this. We actually want as much color as we can get because it's going to dissipate out into the damp of the paper. Doing one of the leaping bunnies down the bottom here, and I'll try and fit one more in. Now my mistake was that I went back and touched up a couple of these, but check this out. See how different this one is. See how the edges are a lot more jagged, the color's more saturated, and it's not moving as much. That's because the paper had already started to dry in this short time. But I decided to go back, add some more color to all these bunnies. I think it's okay if you add it in the middle of them, like it should still be damp there, but watch me try and fix this one on the edge. It does not quite go to plan. I think like, oh, just gently touch the edges with some water and let it flow a bit further. It just gets even worse. So it's a good lesson, you know, playing around and doing stuff like this. You learn that sometimes it's best to just leave it and not try and perfect it because the watercolor will fight against you. So I've tried to like make all the edges damp here, and instead I've just dirtied the paper, and that's probably like my least favorite one. But I just thought this was such a fun and quick little activity, and you know, if you're really worried about your form and you know, you don't think you're the best at drawing or anything like that, give this one a go because it's just really loose. But it's another good lesson in water control as well, because if you go into this damp page with a ton of water on your brush, everything is going to explode outwards. So you can help control that by loading up your brush with color, but just dabbing off a little bit on some paper towel, and that's going to soak up the excess water and it shouldn't explode outwards as far. Think of your paintbrush like a vacuum cleaner or a leaf blower, depending how much moisture is in it. If there's too much moisture on the brush versus the page, it's like a leaf blower, it's going to explode everywhere. But if there's hardly any moisture on the brush and there's some on the page, it's going to suck it up like a vacuum cleaner. And there was our 2 sets of bunnies. So fun. I really love them. But let's move on to our last project now, which is along the same lines, but we are going to paint some little chickens. So, you know, like the little bags of chickens you can buy from the $2 store, and they're just like the little fluffy chickens with beady little eyes and little orange legs. I just thought this would be a fun one to paint as well. And you know what? You could even combine them. You could paint some loose bunnies intertwined with some loose chickens. So I'm not doing any color mixing for this one at this point. I'm just dipping into primary yellow and painting some blobs. And I think the fun thing about this one is you don't have to think too much about like the head and the body. Like just plop some color down, and then it's kind of like, I don't know if this existed anywhere else in the world, Mr. Squiggle. Like you just have to kind of make do with the shape that you get. So that's kind of what I was doing with this. I was just putting blobs down, and then I thought I'll figure it out. I'll figure out where the head and the body should be. But I'm drying all that off, and look how massive that first one went when the page was at its dampest. And then as it started to soak in and dry a little bit, it got a little bit more easy to control the spread and the flow of that color. But I wanted to start off with the legs first. So I've made a little orange color with primary yellow and primary red. And I decided this first blob, he's laying on his back. That's what it looks like to me. So I've painted these legs up in the air and a little beak facing up in the air as well. Just a little triangle. Really basic stuff here. Just a stick for the leg, a few little prongs out for the toes, nothing realistic. The one on the right here facing the right. I did this one here to kind of look like its wings were flapping out to the side and he's standing nice and tall. But like you get the choice here. Like you can make the legs short. You can make it look like it's sitting, it's standing, it's on its back. it's kind of fun. I don't know, something about this just, it's like doing a puzzle or something. It just lights my brain up. And this last one here, just facing the front pretty much, and I'm going to make his legs go up higher and make it look like he's kind of, he's just disproportionate a little bit. He's pushed back a little bit because I did that blob a little too large compared to the others. I've just cheated a tiny bit here and grabbed some Mars Black and mixed that in with my orange color for the eyes because I didn't want a stark black. So I thought I'd just mix it in with a bit of an orange, make it more of a brown color, and then go and paint the eyes in. So I'm choosing on some of them to paint both eyes in where I want them facing the front, or just one eye if they are facing the side in any way. And that's our chickens, like super easy. I know all these projects were like a little bit hyperlapsed just because they are so repetitive, so don't feel like you have to get all of this done in 20 minutes. It definitely would have taken me like double, but have fun. It's such a great lesson in water control and just like letting loose, having fun, getting brush to paper, and just getting past some of that art block in our mind of like we have to make something perfect. No, we don't. Art should be fun, and I hope you have fun with these projects. I'll see you in the next one.